Hello everyone and welcome back to the Bristol and Bath Lifting Club. My name is Mark.
And my name is Liam.
And today guys, we are talking about It's a Trap.
A first trap?
Not the thirst trap. Rather, the traps, aka the trapezius, the muscles on either side of your neck.
It looked like a kite, but it's not a kite. But it looks like one in an anatomy chart.
Exactly. If they get big enough, you might fly away.
I can show you a picture, if you ask me nicely, in my new book. I went to HomeSense in Salisbury, and in that they had a bunch of DK books, like Intro to such and such, and they had the science of strength training and the science of yoga, and I thought, I'll tell you what, I'm going to get them because they got really nice pictures in it. It saves me having to Google things when I'm trying to explain to people. And there's lovely pictures of the traps. What people mistakenly don't understand is the traps are like a kite. There's upper traps and lower traps. People neglect the lower traps.
They do. The traps don't just sit on top of your upper back. They're not just those lumpy things that pop out your shirt. They actually go down your back, which is what we're going to talk about today.
In a kite shape.
In a kite shape.
Like a diamond in the sky, but not in the sky, it's on your back.
Exactly.
Before we go into that, what is a first trap? Because I'm not really up with the social media lark. So what is the definition of a first trap?
So I'm pretty sure a thirst trap is when a male or female social media person,
No non-binaries?
and it could be anyone I guess,
Okay.
posts a sexy picture and you're like, ooh, a sexy picture. So
Right.
it ropes you in, and then there's like a link to like a Patreon or an OnlyFans. Yeah, exactly.
So if it doesn't have a link in any way, shape or form trying to exploit you for money, would that be classed as a first trap or not?
That's just a thirst.
That's just the first, so it's not really a trap. Okay.
Could be a trap.
It's interesting.
Could be a trap.
So all of the people like Big Man who likes to post pictures of himself on the internet, that's not really first trapping because he doesn't have an OnlyFans.
Or does he?
Well, I don't know.
We presume he doesn't. Maybe he does.
He might have one, but it's not in English, so I don't know.
Some people might like that.
It's all in rupees. How many rupees for what? Anyway, this is the sort of thing that should be for the extended edition. So let's get back on track, I suppose. So the traps are part of the hashtag yoke, is what they say, isn't it?
Hey, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What's the
right.
yoke, though?
So the yoke is your upper back, traps and neck, and they're responsible for making you look like a thick boy in clothes.
Making you look like you lift.
Exactly right.
Right.
Making you look bigger
strong.
than you actually are. Yeah, potentially.
Right, okay. So for people that are well into their aesthetics, this is real important, is it?
I think you're going to look bigger in clothes if you don't have a pencil neck and small traps. So if you have quite a big traps, quite a thick neck, then you're going to have more of a athletic looking build. Yeah.
Right, okay. So also quite important from a structure perspective and from a sports perspective as well, because, you know, with neck injuries and stuff like that, thick neck, you see that with people that take a beating, don't you? Whether it's boxers or whether it's like people that play rugby or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Combat sport athletes or any sort of sport where you're getting knocked around, having a thick neck just helps, you know, offset things like concussion or a neck injury.
Now, I'm presuming no one listening is playing any sort of sport at a high level and that no one gives a shit about sports. All you care about is
looking big.
Basically aesthetics. So we'll go with the aesthetics thing, and then we'll try and, you know, wean you off of just pure aesthetics and vanity and try to get you to, you know, lead a more fulfilling life and get strong for the sake of getting strong. I don't know.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Train for general strength.
Yeah, train not just to look better naked. Train
to look better in clothes as well.
To live longer, to be happier, and other such shit, right?
Exactly.
So, how does one train the traps?
Well, let's talk about the function of the traps. So, one of the functions...
It does this.
Liam just did a little Shrug? I don't know.
It's a shrug.
Exactly.
The traps are built when you're around people that you just want to shrug off.
Yeah, like, get
You're
away.
just like, oh god.
Well, I don't know.
If you watch too many cringy American comedies, films, and you're cringing so much that you're shrugging at them, will that build the traps?
Yeah.
Or is that just body weight exercise?
If people ask me too many math problems, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know. That's how I got thick traps. I can't do math, so I'm like, I don't know.
thick people should have real thick traps, is that what you're saying?
You calling me thick?
Well, you kind of just...
Is that with a double C as well?
You kind of just said. I mean, you opened yourself up to that one. Just like a thicko would.
Oh, I was thinking of the other type of thick.
Oh, thick as in thick.
As in double C.
Yeah. Okay. That's for I was going to say that's for the Patreon. That's for the OnlyFans.
Yeah. All right. So one of the let's say functions of the traps is to elevate the scapula, so to bring your shoulders up towards your ears, essentially. And another function, which people don't realize, is just to keep your arms in their sockets when you're carrying heavy load.
There is actually another important function.
Posture.
No. Can you guess what it is?
Yeah, being able to shrug.
A lot of people don't know what it is, but it is a very important big one in fitness.
Alright, go on.
So the real important part of the traps is that they're primarily there to stop your side delts from growing from doing lateral raises.
They do take over.
Because they take over, and there's lots and lots of YouTube videos and lots of fitness influencers that bang on and on and on about the perfect way to do a side raise or a lateral raise. Is never a side lateral raise, because that's basically saying side twice. I fucking hate it when people do that. What's your thoughts on the side/lateral raise?
Oh my god, I think they're massively overrated and they don't provide much value. And also, before we get into that, these people who keep trying to take the traps out of the side delt raise, you want your traps to be involved with the side delt raise. Okay, one of the benefits is that it can hit your traps, and your shoulders are not going to get less work because your traps are getting involved. It's just a natural movement of the traps to help raise the shoulder. So if you see any sort of fitness influencer banging on about isolating the side delts by taking the traps out of it, just click off the video. Okay, it's not worth your time. But going back to side raises, I've been doing them since I was about, 13 years old. And I saw...
You must be getting tired by now.
Yeah.
Non-stop.
Non-stop, yeah. But I've been doing them for years, and I saw very minimal growth in my side delts. And because they're such a poor leveraged exercise, it's really hard to add weight to them over time, following the basic principles of progressive overload. So for me, I found them to be quite a bit of a waste of time, and if you're gonna do them, treat them as like the cherry on top of the icing on top of the cake. So
like a lat pull down.
Yeah,
treat them like a lat pull down.
Do your big heavy hitting movements first, follow that up with another heavy hitting movement, and if you want to do some additional shoulder work, throw them in at the end, but they are not the be all and end all, and you're better off channeling that energy and that time into building up vertical pressing movements.
Any smart person that's on the Lifting Club Patreon who's read some of my case studies and such that I've written about how I design training programs and stuff will notice that there's a selection of exercises which are called the I don't fucking want to go home yet exercises, and they're normally one of the ones that I put in there. This is one of those extra volume / I really want to spend 3 hours at the gym instead of just a little bit of time at the gym, so I'll go and do something on top of all of the training that's actually going to get me somewhere.
Exactly, and there's so many better exercises you can be pouring your time into. Like if you're really interested in building your side delts, do some upright rows. They're like a big compound movement that you can get stronger at over time. You can turn them into a high pull as well, which we'll come on to a little bit later when we discuss traps. But anything that raises the shoulder is going to build the shoulder, okay?
Yeah, there is another benefit to upright rows. It'll give Jeff Cavalier a heart attack if he sees you do them.
Yeah, one of those exercises that belong in the graveyard, right? No! Upright rows are awesome, okay? Incorporate them in your routine. They're really good for building the side delts. You can load them up quite heavily over time. And if you combine that with the overhead press and just heavy rowing movements, There's a secret, guys. That would build you some 3D big ass delts.
So, when it comes to dumbbell, kettlebell, or whatever type of shrug, any sort of actual shrug designed to target the traps, I've never, ever, from what I can think of, ever put it in a beginner program.
No, same.
But why?
Because people need to focus on building their base first.
Yeah.
So the traps respond really, really well to the weighted stretch. Okay, so holding heavy weights in your hands. So for a beginner, simply getting stronger at the deadlift, barbell rows, and even your overhead press, because the traps will be engaged when you overhead press. That is going to do way more than picking up some light dumbbells and shrugging them all day. So beginners don't really need them because everything is weak, including their traps. They need to focus on the big heavy hitting movements, and then when they get to a high enough level, then you can insert some heavy shrugs in order to build them. But yeah, beginners, early intermediates, no, you don't need them.
I hate my traps. I've always disliked my traps because I think that they're in disproportion to the rest. Because they were the first things that started to get bigger, and it made my shoulders, I think, look like a triangle. I didn't like it. It was just like, yeah, it was always like a very self-conscious thing. That and calves.
Yeah, okay. So see, I always wanted to build my traps because I was really skinny, pencil neck, no traps, no neck. So for me, I always wanted to get a bigger yoke.
I've never, ever, ever done any trap direct training. Unfortunately, they still grow because of the deadlifts and everything else that I do, and the overhead press and the hex bar overhead press, and all sorts of stuff. So I'm not saying do what I do or anything like that, but I am saying if you're thinking about like what a lot of people are chasing with regards to aesthetics and stuff and trying to identify the aesthetic muscles, the show muscles and stuff, don't fall into that kind of advanced bodybuilder way of thinking that a lot of YouTube fitness and TikTok fitness and that does, where they think now I need an exercise for each one of these. Think of it in terms of the big compound stuff, which I don't think that people will tend to intuit that normally, because people tend to think, well, I need to go with where I feel the aching. And there's a lot of exercises that are really, really good that works muscles where you don't necessarily get a huge ache, or the aches and stuff that you get are overtaken by other parts of the body. Yeah. Like, think about how much stuff you get covered on my wonderful pendule row. All sorts of stuff. Yeah. And yet you're not necessarily going to think, oh, you know, what does it actually do? People think, oh, it's just this type of an exercise, or it just does the upper part of the back or something like that. It's like it does loads and loads and loads of stuff. Like the deadlift does loads and loads and loads of stuff. People think, oh, posterior chain exercise. Most people that say that don't necessarily know what the posterior chain is. Yeah. But they say, oh, it does all the stuff going up the back of the body, which is fair enough, but it does everything. It does lots of stuff. It's a weird, deadlifts is a weird kind of exercise because half of it is doing the work of actually getting you to stand up, but a lot of it is also you're locking yourself into a strong position and straining. So like isometric holds are very different to actual like normal exercise and stuff like that. When you're holding yourself in a position, don't underestimate the amount of effort it actually takes to do something like that under a lot of strain.
Yeah, I mean the traps, they really can benefit from very high intensity, so lots of heavy weight, and also they can take a beating, so lots of volume. You'll rarely feel your traps sore the next day until you start lifting some really heavy weights, but they will be working and they will be growing. And if you look at some strongman, for example, a lot of them have massive traps, and it's because of these heavy weights they're carrying in their hands. So doing heavy deadlifts, heavy farmers walks. Okay, all this is going to build your traps like crazy because of that weighted stretch. Anything that's driving your shoulders down because you're holding heavy weights in your hands is going to be building your traps, which is why after like a deadlift day, my traps are aching like crazy from just holding heavy weights in my hands.
Traps, abs, and calves seem to be one of those things which you could dedicate time on a program to, but the reason for doing it is probably going to be for aesthetic reasons. It's probably going to be because you're probably not happy with where they are from an aesthetic perspective, because those are the ones that people seem to put in and also train incorrectly. And I don't put any of those in like a first starter type, first month in the gym type program, because I don't see much of a point in that. I mean, there's so much other stuff that needs to be, I don't know if I would say mastered, but you need to get proficient at.
Yeah, I agree. I get so many beginner lifters ask me if they can do shrugs, and I'm like, well, can you deadlift 200 kilos? And they're like, oh no, I'm nowhere near that. And like, exactly, shrugs with some light dumbbells are not going to do anything. You might think they'll do something, but they won't. You're better off just building your deadlift, again, building that base strength that me and Liam have spoken about before. Heavy deadlifts, heavy rows, overhead press to an extent, all of these will build your traps. And then you don't really need to start throwing in direct trap work until after that. And even then, I've seen guys never do a direct trap exercise and still get huge traps just because they're so freaking strong at like deadlifting and rowing. We're talking like, 5 plate aside deadlift for like high reps, or a heavy row, 140 kilos for high reps. That's going to do more than just picking up some dumbbells and shrugging it up and down.
What about trap judgment? Because if someone has big traps, the first thing people tend to turn around nowadays, the gym bros and that. Exactly, yeah. They listen to Derek, more plates, more dates. Yeah. And they're like, well, I know because I'm educated now. I know that if you've got big shoulders and you've got big traps, then you must be on gear because they're the biggest parts of the body which you're training and stuff. And I kind of think, no,
that's not the case. So the traps and the shoulders respond really well to anabolics, so drugs, and they just kind of blow up, which is why you can usually spot someone who's on steroids because they'll have disproportionate traps and shoulders to the rest of their body. However, you can still get really big traps and shoulders as a natural lifter, and that doesn't mean you're on steroids, it just means you've gotten freaking strong.
You will get really, really big in that area if you actually lift properly and efficiently. And I wouldn't necessarily say functionally, because people will think too much about CrossFit and shit if I say functional too frequently. But in terms of like strength, strong wise, because it's all of these body parts for these big lifts and stuff like that, they're all like really necessary. Like the traps are there for a reason. A lot of these muscles and stuff are there for a reason. There are some muscles that are there which are kind of like, is there much point to that? Like the nice little teardrop on the quad, that kind of thing is like I like to judge people based on it, but it's like, is it useful or is it something that you just know that you get from loads of leg extensions?
Yeah.
But,
So let's talk about training a little bit, because there are certain things you can do to train your traps to get them bigger if that's what you're after. But honestly, guys, until you're deadlifting at least 220 kilos, rowing 140 kilos, and overhead pressing, anywhere from 90 to 100 kilos, I would say leave the direct trap work, all right? But once you hit those numbers, which can be achieved within 3 to 5 years of dedicated training, then you can start throwing in some heavy trap direct work that will help them grow. So we'll start with you, Liam. What's your favourite trap exercises, even though you hate traps?
I don't fucking do them. I don't do them. I tell you what the worst one was one that I was told by a PT, right? Is foolishness, right? Oh, if you do a deadlift, just shrug at the end of the deadlift and then you work your traps.
Oh, God.
Even then, I knew, this was before I did any training for PTing or anything like that, even then I knew, and I thought the deadlift was supposed to be really heavy. How come I can shrug at the top of it if it's like...
Exactly.
That came from a personal trainer.
Oops.
I know, that's like proper foolishness. My two go-to, right, this is something that everyone should note down, right? There's two things that are going to ensure really, really good trap development. The first one is the big 5 lifts.
Boom.
The second one, which is very important, when you've mastered how to do the lifts properly, this is the very, very, very important next step for you. Next step, don't train like a bitch, right? Because that is going to ensure that you're going to get somewhere with your traps, you see, because you could do the very slow, perfect motions for all of these things, which are technically perfect form, but if you're not lifting very heavy weight, and you're doing an RPE of 5 out of 10, rating of perceived exertion, how fucking difficult is it? 5 out of 10, not very fucking difficult, then things aren't going to get very far. However, the mistake people make is, I do feel a dull ache, I do feel a bit tired, but you get tired from cardio, and that's basically what you've just been doing.
Yeah, essentially.
What about your ideas for traps and such? Is there any favourite trap exercises?
Yeah, I've got two actually, two that I really like. So one of them is what I call the power shrug. Alright guys, so you load up a barbell or a hex bar, load up with as much weight as you can, use straps, okay, so you want to strap yourself into this because it's going to be that heavy. And then instead of just shrugging the weight up slow and controlled, I want you to use some leg drive. So dip down slightly with your legs and then use the power of your legs along with the shrug to drive the weight up as high as you can. Shrug, try and get your shoulders to your ears, and then just let the weight fall, and you'll get that catch effect, which will really pull down on your traps. Okay, so you want to use a weight that's almost similar to your deadlift, but you wouldn't be able to shrug without the leg drive. Okay, so use a weight similar to your deadlift, but if you can shrug it without leg drive, it's not heavy enough. Dip down slightly and then shrug as hard as you can. Doesn't have to be perfect, okay, you don't have to get your shoulders up too high, but you want those shoulders moving, you want the scapula raising up and down, you want that elevation of the scaps. And then just go ham, go crazy, do like anywhere from 5 to 10 rep sets, and then just keep loading up more and more weight, get that stretch, and then get that overload on the weighted shrug, on the power shrug, and then just watch your traps blow up over time. And I've seen people go from like 3 plates, so 140 kilos, up to like 260 kilos plus, and your traps will grow like crazy. So that's probably one of my favorites. But my all-time favorite, I'll keep this going, is what we call a high pull, which comes from Olympic lifting.
Ooh.
And it's like an upright row, but like the power shrug, you use a little bit of leg drive, a little bit of a hip hinge. Okay, so you hinge your hips back, you bend your knees, and then you drive up with your legs, shoving your hips into the bar, and then you drive the bar up as high as you can. Now, a lot of people say just get the bar up to nipple line, and I say that's pretty good. But if you can, get it higher than that, because the higher the shoulder goes, the more of a contraction you're going to get at the top. So really drive your shoulder and your elbows upwards, get the bar to touch underneath your chin, and then just let the bar drop, and from that height you'll get that force catch at the bottom, which will really pull on your traps, forcing that catch, and that leaves me sore for like 5 days after. That is by far the best trap exercise I've ever done. And I like to do these for low reps because it's a bit more of a power movement, a bit more of an explosive movement. So anywhere from 1 to 5 reps for multiple sets, and yeah, your traps would be toasted.
We've got to talk about our sponsor, our potential new sponsor, which is for people that lift real heavy. If you lift real heavy, so heavy that you end up splitting your shorts and need lots and lots of shorts, you need a year's supply of shorts, then you need to get yourself to MyProtein, innit? The
Shout
website.
out to MyProtein.
Shout out to MyProtein. And if you can't lift heavy, you also need to go to MyProtein and get some really good gym wear, because if you can't lift heavy, you might as well look good lifting light.
There we go. And those are decent, guys. I've got 2 of the hoodies, which you see on my Instagram videos. I always wear them during winter for sure. And the clothing's really good. I've had mine for almost 3 years now and still going strong.
So what's your opinion on farmers walks in general, and then for trap training?
Fucking awesome.
You like that?
Yeah.
Because there's this thing that's an exercise that's not really an exercise, which I learned when I was younger, and it's called going shopping with your mother, auntie and nan.
Take all the bags.
And having to carry all their fucking bags around the shopping centre.
Yeah.
That really works the traps.
See, I found out about this because I didn't know what a farmer's walk is for many years, right? And then when I was at uni, I had to go down to Sainsbury's and pick up all my groceries.
Yeah.
And then I had to walk back like 40 minutes back to my dorm. And I'll be holding all these bags, and by the end of it, my traps would be pumped. They'd be so sore. And that's how I discovered farmers walks. And then I found out that it's actually a legit strongman trap training exercise. And I was like, well, hot damn, sign me up.
Yeah, because it feels like, I don't know, I never really liked doing them, although I did them, but mainly just for like checking posture and alignment and stuff like that. So you just get a really heavy dumbbell, but you'd only hold it on one side and then walk up and down the room, or get someone to walk up and down the room and watch how much they bend and twist and contort versus how much they can from, you know, holding it in their right hand, holding it in their left hand. That's quite an interesting one. I have a controversial question now. Okay, controversy. So is it the hex bar or is it the trap bar?
It's both.
Right. If it's both, this is the problem, right? Because I say that it's the hex bar. It should be hex bar. It's kind of hexagonal shaped.
Yeah.
If it's the trap bar, it's not right. It seems like a gym sin to be putting trap bar deadlift on a program. It doesn't seem right. It
comes from Olympians, I believe. So it used to be called an Olympic shrug bar, and because
Olympic shrug
bar, yeah, right. Which is why it's got the high handle, so it's easy to pick up, and then you shrug the shit out of it. That's what Olympians did to like build their traps. Not to be mistaken, some people think it's called a trap bar because you're trapped inside of it.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's called a trap bar because it trains your traps. But then it just got known as a hex bar because it's a hex shape. I have some clients that call it the chariot bar because when you put on, some larger weights on the side, it is literally like a little chariot. And I saw an Instagram where someone had got, they'd got a hex bar. Yeah. They'd put some 20s on the side, some plates on each side, and then they'd put 2 barbells through it. I've seen that as well.
And then they put, I think it was like a...
they made a little car.
Yeah, it was like a the neutral bar, or the what is it that you normally call it? Tricep bar. You normally call it neutral bar. I call it. And they put that through the front, and they actually made a car that you can sit on and push around. Yeah, and that was very clever.
I was impressed.
Yeah.
So
tension. That's constant tension that keeps all of those things together. Yeah.
If you get bored of deadlifting with a hex bar or overhead pressing, just turn it into a car, guys. That's the next level.
Yeah.
But yeah, so farmers carries are pretty awesome because when you're walking, not only are you getting that weighted stretch that we talked about earlier, but every step feels like a tiny little shrug. Okay, and it really does pull down on your upper back. So heavy farmers, and again, go heavy. This is not something slow and controlled. You want to be explosive. Go really, really heavy to the point where you can barely deadlift it up and then walk with it, essentially. And that, again, will build your traps like crazy.
So you shouldn't be doing light farmers walks. So farmers walks isn't necessarily like carrying the shopping home, because I know carrying that home might feel bad. But are you aiming more to get to the other end of the room with a really, really heavy weight, or are you aiming more for how long you can keep it walking for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that? What's your advice?
The first one. So load up hard and heavy, and you're going to be running, essentially, walking really quickly for about 15 meters or so, and then drop them, re-pick them up, and then turn back around and go back again. And you can do that for like anywhere from 3 to 5 sets, loading more weight each time, till you get to the point where you can barely hold on to the bars. Farmers is obviously a strongman competitive event. If you're competing in a strongman, it's going to be heavy. All right, guys. So, and the traps respond to heavy weight, so you might as well train it heavy, prepare for your event, and build yourself a good amount of trap mass as well.
Are traps actually sexy? Like, they're considered one of the attractive muscles, like the yoke, but only from a man's kind of perspective. It doesn't seem to be like, it's always men that say check out the traps on that, it's always men that are like, fucking hell, look at his traps. I don't ever see or hear women discuss, oh, I like that triangle. And we're out of time for this week's episode. Stay tuned, go over to the Patreon to listen to the extent